All right, friends, going live on a very quick video on just to the point of what happened on the press conference today with Sachs and his team. Really simple. The announcement was number one, a lot of fluff on what's happening with the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve and the potential sovereign wealth fund. There was no real answers given. Same news that we already got, which is basically the U.S. is committed to be a leader in the digital, the digital space for cryptocurrency. And it was a general basic response and general announcement. It was an introduction of the team that's going to be part of this whole process that the U.S. is going through to become a leader in the crypto space. Overall, the general sentiment is we know it's good news for the long term for the U.S. to be involved and be a leader in the digital crypto space. And at the end of the day, the press conference was a little left to be desired. It's not bad news. It's not good news. It's just government. And we know that they're going to take time to figure this out. We knew when they initially announced it, when Trump took office, that there was going to be like a 180-day period for them to decide on this digital stockpile. And basically today it was like, hey, here's our plans. We're still committed to this, but there was no real plan presented. I don't expect we're going to see anything real in the next week, 2 weeks, or even month. So they will come back eventually, in my opinion. This is not financial advice, not legal advice, not tax advice, not investment advice. But in my opinion, they're going to come back sometime in the next 180 days with some announcement that they did something in terms of buying Bitcoin and putting it in a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Well, and they did something with a sovereign wealth fund where they allocated a portion of Bitcoin to the sovereign wealth fund. And they made some moves. And I think that's what we're going to see. So ultimately, if you didn't watch the press conference, no need to watch it. There's nothing major that came out of it. You didn't miss anything. And I don't think it's bullish or bearish for Bitcoin. I don't think it's bullish or bearish for MicroStrategy. I think the U.S. maintains their position very simply that they will be a leader in the crypto space. I believe that it's smart PR for them to be continuing to communicate with the public that we are continuing to investigate this and look into a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We are looking at a sovereign wealth fund, and we are also continuing to look at the potential of being leaders in the digital crypto space. Okay, so leaders in this space, it sounds good to me. They maintain their position that the U.S. wants to be leaders in the space, which is great. So if they maintain the position, they continue to maintain and communicate the message, which is important. You know, if somebody hears something once and then they hear it a second time and they hear it a third time, it's good that they hear a recurring message that is the same, but eventually we do need some action. And we know it needs to happen within the 180-day period. And I think that soon there will be a bill that is passed on this. So that's good news for the long term. Ultimately, also, if you look at the U.S. reserves overall, you can do the research on it, fact check me. I believe the present day value of our gold in reserves is about $500 billion, so like $500 billion. And then as I started to research some of the rest of our assets that are sitting in reserves in the U.S., it's like another $280 billion. So we don't keep a whole lot in reserves. And when you look at the U.S. debt of $36 trillion, I don't even think we have $1 trillion in reserves. So let's say the U.S. decides that they're going to allocate 10% of their reserves into Bitcoin. I mean, that might be what, $50 million. So when I'm looking that, I'm just looking at the data that I pulled and researched of what they presently have in reserves. Now, they may have some other plans if they're going to pull money from here or pull money from there to do something. That's the reserve piece. In terms of the sovereign wealth fund of where they would actually get money to allocate to that, that's a different story, right? So we will see what they come up with. I know based on what I'm seeing in my opinion that obviously they're looking for ways to add crypto to their game plan. And so we will see what ways that manifests in. And I think they're still trying to figure out the best way to do it. I think the main message just from a PR standpoint today was like, hey, we are going to make sure that we protect the consumer and that we have legislation that's passed to protect the consumer. Part of what was shared was like, we know in the past that we were starting to make some forward progress, and the prior administration wasn't really friendly and wasn't clear about the laws around crypto. And so the current administration appears that they want to make the laws around crypto super clear. They want to make sure that people aren't getting debanked, because we know some people that were supporting crypto were literally being debanked by certain banks. And so they want to make the legislation and the laws super clear. And this is a good thing. And if you watch any of Michael Saylor's videos, you'll watch him in the past talking about a year ago, 2 years ago, saying, hey, it's good thing that when the US comes in and decides that they're going to regulate crypto, that is a really good thing. And so for the first time in this administration, I'm bullish that we are going to have regulation that is actually clear, so people know what the rules are, they know what the laws are, because you can't play in a space that's the wild, wild west. So regulation is going to be good, the laws are going to be good, and clarity is going to be good. And so I think, one, it's super prudent for the US to not take a whole bunch of time, but take the appropriate time with the new administration to go, hey, we're clear, we're going to be a leader in the AI space and the crypto space. That's the message. We're clear, we're going to regulate this thing. How we're going to do it in terms of a reserve or a stockpile, we don't know yet. How we're going to do it in terms of what our sovereign wealth fund is going to be, we don't know yet. There were things floating around where I saw that in the sovereign wealth fund, this is just press, guys, that the US might add TikTok to that. Could be total speculation, right? So there's all kinds of ideas floating around about what the US is going to do. I don't think we're going to find out in a week, 2 weeks, or even a month of exactly the allocations they're going to make and what the exact allocation is and what the exact cryptocurrency is. We're hoping that it's Bitcoin, right? So we'll find out. They're going to go through their due process. They've assembled a committee. The committee is going to investigate things. They're going to put together laws, and they're going to come out and they're going to decide on something. I cannot imagine that they're not going to come back and decide that they're going to allocate some money to Bitcoin. But how much that will be, again, go look at the U.S. reserves. Go look it up online. We don't hold a whole bunch of money on reserves. So the good thing, I think, on this, and so what are they going to put 50 billion into Bitcoin? Would that be great? Yeah. But when you look at the ETFs and you look at sailors' purchases of Bitcoin, like, they could outpace the U.S. government. And that's very real. Adding the U.S. government, I think the number one thing is, yes, it adds money, but number two, the rest of the countries will follow. It's no secret that the U.S. controls the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Okay, so if we decide as a country that we are going to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, we are going to have a sovereign wealth fund that allocates a portion of that to Bitcoin or crypto. If we decide that, the rest of the world's going to follow. Okay. And we know who's in charge of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. The voting power is in the US. In fact, the US has 16.5% of the voting control. And you can't veto that without 85%. So do the math. 16.5%. If you want to veto something, you need 85% majority on it. So the U.S. basically holds the voting power even in the International Monetary Fund. We control it. All right, it's that simple. And it's a weird thing. If you look at some of the U.S., some of our reserves, they're held in basically, I'm going to give you a metaphor, like monopoly money inside the International Monetary Fund, where it's just like printing money in there. They have something called an SDR. Go look it up, special drawing rights. And it's basically money that's printed in the International Monetary Fund, just like we print dollars here in the U.S. We print monopoly money in this International Monetary Fund. Go check it out. It's really wild if you want to research it. And in times of crisis, when people need help, like Argentina in the past has borrowed from the IMF. We know that the dollar pretty much controls the IMF. Now, we have countries like Europe and China and Japan and the US that are part of this International Monetary Fund in Europe and all of that. But we know that the dollar is the key thing that controls the global currencies. It does. The dollar is the thing. Okay. And we know that countries go in debt to the International Monetary Fund, which is basically controlled by the US. So like when Argentina needed to borrow money recently, who do you think they borrowed it from? The IMF. Okay. And they borrowed the money from the IMF and they went into debt to the IMF. So when you look at how the U.S. exerts control through their power, not only of the dollar here in the U.S., but through the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, they exert their power in a way where people then can come, like countries, and borrow money from this fund. And so Argentina went in debt to the IMF. And then to get out of the debt, they had to use the SDR. Go check it out. Special drawing rights, basically monopoly money. And so you can tap into that monopoly money. But the deal is another country needs to be willing to do an agreement with you to trade their currency for your monopoly money. So when Argentina was in debt to the IMF, they said, we're going to tap our monopoly money, our special drawing rights called the SDR. And they tapped that money and they said to China, hey, China, we want to trade out some of our monopoly money for your currency, the yuan. And so China lent them money in the yuan. And then they used some of the money that China lent them to pay off the International Monetary Fund and the debt to them. So if you look at the scenario of how money is exchanged, not only in the US, but at a global level between the people who are involved in International Monetary Fund. So when crises happen, the IMF is there to bail out certain countries. In 2009, the IMF was there after the 2008 crazy banking crisis that we had here with the mortgages. And so the IMF is controlled primarily by the US, So, and it's amazing to see, if you do some research on it, to the countries that then go in debt to the IMF and then have to use this SDR to eventually swap out an agreement with another country like China that will take their credits, their monopoly money, and give them currency, then go pay off the debt they have to the IMF. You can't make this shit up, man, okay? Why would China or somebody take these points that are printed into the IMF that every country that's part of it gets? And by the way, certain countries get a larger amount of this monopoly money called the SDR, the special drawing rights on these funds. They're just printed in there. In 2021, go look at it. It was like 650 billion that was printed into this thing? Go check it out, okay? So it's just wild to see it. And so what happens is if you're going to swap out your points, your monopoly money, to get real currency like Argentina did with China, what do you think that comes with? It comes with a whole set of rules, man. Like China's like, yeah, I'll take your monopoly money, your points, right? And I'll give you some of our yuan, right? Some of our money to help you out. But what do you think that comes with? It comes with a whole bunch of agreements of things that they're going to have to do for China, whether it's trade agreements, whether it's political things that they need to do that they need to agree to. Like, it comes with a whole bunch of rules. So the IMF, man, in terms of how it's regulated and how it's run, I mean, who do you think controls that as well, right? The Fed. The Fed. All right. Who's the biggest leader in the IMF? It's the US. Who prints money in the United States? The Fed. Okay. And we know that the Fed is actually private. And we know that the Fed is a private organization, whereas the Treasury is a government organization. But then if you look at who's in bed with the Fed and who really controls the different Fed banks that exist, because there's 12 regional Federal Reserve banks all across the country of the US, who's in bed with them, man? Go take a look at it. You got Bank of America, you got Morgan Stanley, you got the major banks of the world that are literally involved in the Federal Reserve banks, the regional banks. And if you go look at how they're involved, they decide on the leadership that is part in the heads of these banks. They elect the board members to some of these banks. And so the control is so highly, highly, highly centralized in the private banks of America, like the Morgan Stanleys, like the Bank of Americas, who, like the Wells Fargos, who literally have and exert influence on the Federal Reserve regional banks across this country. And the Fed is the one who prints the money. And then who do you think controls the International Monetary Fund? The Fed. And who do you think is in partnership with the Federal Reserve banks? The private banks. So who do you think controls the country and who do you think controls the world, my friends? It's simple, okay? Go look up the data. You can fact check it. This is what's going on in the world. So all of this to say that the U.S. has a huge influence, obviously, with the printing of money in this country. The Federal Reserve does. And the U.S. has a huge influence in the International Monetary Fund. There's many countries that are in debt, like Argentina, to the International Monetary Fund. And who controls the voting power in the International Monetary Fund? The U.S. does. They control the majority of the voting power. So when you look at this, when the U.S. does come out with a strategic Bitcoin reserve or a sovereign wealth fund that makes us the leader in the digital, currency or crypto world, which we will be, other nations will follow suit. Okay. And this isn't to toot our horn of the U.S., because you can look at this as from two sides of the ball here, to go like, wow, that's like, we are literally a monopoly over the money supply of the world. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, if you live in the U.S., you could say that it's a good thing. If you don't live in the U.S., you're under the control of the dollar. And the hope in the end of this, and the light at the end of the tunnel, is the idea that we could have Bitcoin that is now utilized by corporations across the world. We know many corporations are adopting the Bitcoin standard, not just in the US, but all over the world. That's a good thing, because we start to then decentralize this total control of the global currency, which is controlled primarily by the United States. And so if the US adopts a strategic Bitcoin reserve, is it good for the US? Yeah. But then if it becomes profitable for the US, it becomes profitable for the banks. Why? Because the banks are in bed with the Fed. Okay. You know, the different member banks of Bank of America and Morgan Stanley and Wells Fargo, they are in bed with the Fed, because they do elect certain officials that govern those banks. So, you know, it's a massive control center for what's going on in the world. And there's countries that are basically enslaved through debt to the US or the International Monetary Fund. And so we do need a new solution. I think it is great that Bitcoin is going around the world and it's decentralized, because we don't want all the power in the US government. We don't want all the power of Bitcoin being gobbled up by the International Monetary Fund. That's just danger, you know? So I think it'll be great when the US comes in, because the world will follow. And no matter how much they come in with, any action to where they decide to buy some Bitcoin will create a ripple effect, and the rest of the world will follow suit. And even without the government, we still got the states that are pouring in the United States. And we got other countries that you got to believe that the other countries have their plan. And the US isn't all of a sudden going to go, hey, we are going to buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. They're going to do it first, then announce it. I can't imagine they're going to go, we plan to do this, because it's going to be a gold rush where countries all around the world and people are going to want to gobble up as much as possible. And you got to know that people behind the scenes are gobbling up as much as possible. And to not think that, like, you know, does BlackRock have some inside information on what's going to happen with this thing? Like, you know, who has some inside information, you know? And don't think that, like, the Fed has turned to BlackRock for advice and support in doing things when we've gone through global crises. So they do deals together. Okay. They definitely do deals together, the Fed and BlackRock. And so, you know, that BlackRock has a connection to the Fed. You know that they're tied together. You know that the Fed has a connection to Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and all the major private banking powers of the world. And you know that the government and the private banks and BlackRock are intertwined in some plan for a strategic Bitcoin reserve or some plan for crypto. We know BlackRock's already on board. We know that it's pro crypto now for the banks, and we know that the US is pro crypto. When you get the triangle of the Fed, when you get the triangle of you know, the US government, which is, you know, supposed to be separate from the Fed, right? But when you get the triangle of the U.S. government, some type of strategic Bitcoin reserve or some sovereign wealth fund, and then when you get the addition of the private banks that are also involved in this triangle, you will have a total domination of crypto in the world by the U.S. And then other nations will follow in. And so as they're getting whiff of it, you got to imagine people are preparing and countries are preparing to get in this game, because they don't want to be left behind. So, you know, what does the news at the press conference have to do for anything today? Nothing really, other just to reinforce the message. Is it bullish or bearish? I don't think it's bullish or bearish. I think it's what you already know. The U.S. is committed to a digital stockpile, or the U.S. is committed to becoming the leader in crypto in some form or fashion. It may not come in the form of a digital stockpile. It may come more in the form of a sovereign wealth fund. It may come in the form of both. Do we know yet? No, I don't think the U.S. fully knows yet exactly what they're going to execute. So we'll find out soon. So we'll see. Yeah, Greg, Tommy saying, what do you think about the earnings tomorrow? We'll see what happens. Tomorrow's the 5th already, is it? Yeah, it's the 5th. So we'll see what happens with the earnings report that comes out tomorrow. But other than that, All good. I would say my whole viewpoint is stick with the fundamentals. Number one, we're in a bull run. That's always good. The supply is diminishing, and we typically at this point of the year, we're in the second half of the bull run. This is just a pattern that repeats itself every 4 years. We are in it. That's a stable piece of information. Number two, we know that the U.S. keeps sending the same message. They're going to be a leader in cryptocurrency. So they're just reinforcing the message today. No new news, really. Okay. Number three, we know that more and more states are adding Bitcoin as part of their legislative process to approve a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Number four, we know that MicroStrategy continues to buy and will continue to buy, even though they didn't buy this week. They will continue to buy, and they have a plan to do it. Additionally, we know the ETFs are continuing to buy. The Bitcoin buys in the month of January, 50,000 Bitcoin were purchased. So we know that there's still a huge bullish signal of Bitcoin that's being acquired and gobbled up. And that's like the amount of supply that's being issued on a monthly basis is like 14,000 Bitcoin. It's being gobbled up in 50,000, 3x the supply that's being issued. So we know that that's another bullish sign. And we also know that, many corporations are still adopting the Bitcoin standard and adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. So we have the bullish signals. We have the things that we can stably operate on. What the U.S. does or doesn't do, or how much they do, does it play a role in what's going to happen with crypto in 2025? Absolutely. If they came out and said we are going to do nothing, would it negatively affect Bitcoin? I believe so. Would it negatively affect MicroStrategy? I believe so, for sure. But the fact that they keep reinforcing the message means they're coming out with something. And governments move slow. We know this. They're not famous at all for moving fast. And of course, they have to be concerned with laws and regulations to make sure that it's safe, especially with the history of things like past people that did poor and negative things with crypto and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency overall. Of course, they have to regulate things, right? The media will have a field day on them. So we just let them go at their snail's pace. Hopefully with Trump in office, it's not a snail's pace. It turns into a turtle's pace. Hopefully with Trump lighting a fire, the turtle turns into a dolphin or something and swims faster. But at the end of the day, we know governments don't move fast. So stay bullish, stay strong. Not financial advice, but like I'm happy that the price is just chopping right now because I'm still waiting for my money to come in so I can buy additional Bitcoin and MicroStrategy. Okay. My allocations of what I do with my investments are, what I do in my personal choice and personal opinion. It's not financial advice to anybody. You got to look at the markets, look at your risk tolerance, look at your future goals, look at your present situation, look at all the data and make the best decisions for yourself, regardless of what you do. And the most important thing of why I'm here is just to give data, give information, give some education, and have some fun and share some news and be passionate about a subject that I think is really incredible, which is freaking crypto, and mostly which is Bitcoin and MicroStrategy. For me, those are my two. Those are the ones I ride in. Those are the ones that I invest in. Those are the ones that I believe in. I believe in them, one, because Bitcoin is super sound. I believe in MicroStrategy because they have a Bitcoin treasury, and his strategy and his leadership and his certainty and his stick-to-itiveness to his game plan and his constant innovation to constantly come up with new ways to acquire more Bitcoin for MicroStrategy that acquires more Bitcoin per share for shareholders, I think is admirable. In a time where most people are like uncertain, fearful, Michael Saylor stays strong, and he literally just stays the freaking course, and he has not wavered. And I have not seen him waver since 2020 that I've been following him, and he continues and continues and continues and continues to stick to the plan. And what I do hope is that Trump continues to stick to the plan. But obviously, it's not all in Trump's hands. It's got to be passed by the House and the Senate, and this committee needs to come back with their ruling on what they want to do. So it's not 100% in his hands, while Michael Saylor is in a very different situation where it is the majority in his hands and in the hands of MicroStrategy, which is a very good bullish sign for MicroStrategy and a very good bullish sign for Bitcoin, because who gobbles up all the Bitcoin? MicroStrategy, right? And the ETFs. So the U.S. better get in the game. Let's get these slow pokes out of the gate, man. And I think the more that, we all talk and the more that we spread videos and maybe the more that you share lives and you talk to people about your beliefs on Bitcoin or your beliefs around crypto, the more that people use their voice around the world to demand it, the more that I think you're going to see the administration move. And I think the more that you're going to see the world move. People need to learn and get educated. The number of people that understand Bitcoin is very small, and the number of people that understand MicroStrategy is even smaller, by a fraction of a fraction of a fraction smaller. Okay, so not very many people understand the asset, and I wonder how much the committee even really understands about crypto that they've assembled. Like, are they, how much do they really understand, these 5 guys we saw step up to the mic? That we just watched on the press conference. Sachs, probably a high degree of knowledge. Everybody else, I'm not sure. So we'll see what happens. I still stick to my viewpoint. They are going to come back with something. If Trump doesn't, I think it will actually, it will ruin part of his presidency if they don't come back with something. And he will find a creative way to get it done. And that's my viewpoint on the whole game. So I hope it serves you, and hope you're having a great day. Right now, the current price of Bitcoin after the press conference is $97,900. MicroStrategy closed today at $348. MicroStrategy has been pretty steady and consistent, even though we had a drop down to 300 pre-market on Sunday. It's been pretty steady. Michael Saylor's not tapping the ATM, so he's not temporarily diluting the shares right now. And so we'll see what happens tomorrow. We got a big announcement tomorrow on February 5th. So we'll see what happens with that announcement. And keep on enjoying the day. Keep on getting educated on crypto. It's a fun game. Bitcoin, MicroStrategy, love it. It's amazing. You guys are amazing. And we're all having a good time. So let's see what happens tomorrow with the big news that's coming tomorrow. But all of it is, it's news and it's news and it's news, and all the little pieces of news that point in the forward direction of positive vibes towards crypto, towards Bitcoin primarily. All of that news is really, really good. So the more communication we get on it, the more reinforcement we get. Even in the press conference today, I don't think it was negative at all. I think it was just neutral. Hey, this is what we're planning to do. And they're reinforcing what they already told us, basically. There were some nuances, but we didn't really get told anything specific. So you didn't miss much. Not bullish, not bearish, but continue to be long-term bearish over this, in my opinion. All right. Hope to see you on the flip side. Hope you guys are doing well. See you soon.